two giant political figures in a big fight tonight. Nothing more brutal than a friendship turned sour. In his new memoir, former Vice President Dick Cheney decided to take aim at former Secretary of State Colin Powell. What did he write, and how is Powell fighting back? ABC's John Carl on that tonight.
They've been two titans of Republican foreign policy for decades, working side by side through no less than 3 wars.
First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it.
But in his new book, Dick Cheney unloads on Colin Powell, accusing him of undermining President Bush as Secretary of State and being, quote, openly disdainful of the president's policies. Cheney even claims credit for kicking Powell out of the administration after the 2004 election. Now Cheney portrays Powell as two-faced and dishonest, especially on Iraq. Time and again, I heard that Powell was opposed to the war in Iraq, Cheney writes.
You were saying that you had lots of doubts about building this case for war in Iraq. Was it possible at some point to stand up and say, no, we have doubts, we're not writing this speech, we're out of it?
We all did at key points in the preparation of Colin Powell's presentation. The real essence of that presentation, though, they preserved, they being George Tenet and John McLaughlin, and I think under some strong influence from the Vice President's office, they preserved, and that was the mobile biological laboratories, that was the active nuclear program, as symbolized by the aluminum tubes, and it was the existing chemical stocks and connections, hard connections, between al-Qaeda and Baghdad. Those were the real falsehoods in that briefing. Lies created in the Defense Department under Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Doug Feith and his special Iraq team.
Weapons of mass destruction in the hands of the Saddam Hussein regime, a regime that used such weapons, in particular nerve gas.
And was supplied by the United States and Britain with these weapons of mass destruction.
No, I don't believe that's accurate.
Well, yes, they were. Most of the weapons of mass destruction from Saddam Hussein weren't built by him. The machine tools and the ingredients for his biological weapons, they all came from other countries, many of them from this country and Britain.
I don't think that's right. I really think that
it's on the record in the Library of Congress. You'll find it there.
I think the premise of your question is wrong.
Mr. Feith had only to look up this congressional record of a U.S. Senate inquiry in 1992. It shows that the U.S. government approved the sale of biological weapons to Saddam Hussein. The suppliers were this company in Maryland and Porton Down in Britain. If you really want to know the truth about the state of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction before the invasion, listen to Colin Powell in February 2001. He states clearly that there was no threat from Saddam Hussein.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
And this is Condoleezza Rice, Bush's national security advisor, in July of the same year, saying the same thing, putting the lie to their own propaganda.
We are able to keep arms from him. His military forces have not been rebuilt.
And that, many believe, was the truth, a truth that was covered up and conveniently forgotten after September the 11th, when Bush and Blair decided to attack Iraq. They found no weapons of mass destruction, no links with al-Qaeda, no nuclear weapons, no 45-minute threat.
So was it all a charade?
It was 95% charade.
A charade indeed. The invasion had been planned long ago. In July last year, Condoleezza Rice told another Bush official, "That decision has been made. Don't waste your breath." This is not what Bush told the American people.
Now ask me why they wanted to go to war with Iraq, and I'll give you a half a dozen answers. If it's Douglas Feith, it's protection of Israel. If it's Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, it's a little bit of Israel, it's a little bit of oil, and it's a little bit of bringing peace and democracy and freedom to the Middle East. If it's George Bush, it's, oh, I fear the nexus between al-Qaeda and Baghdad, which Cheney had convinced him of, I'm sure. George Tenet hadn't convinced him of it. George Tenet didn't think there was that big a nexus. With Dick Cheney, I think it was oil. Iraq right now is sitting on probably 200 billion barrels, maybe 300 billion barrels. That's Iraq's own oil report. That surpasses Saudi Arabia. If Iraq is sitting on 300 billion barrels of oil, if that turns out to be true, it'll be more than Saudi Arabia. Now you know why Dick Cheney went to war in Iraq.
Well, let me tell you about Halliburton, the company I ran. I'm very proud of what I did at Halliburton. The people of Halliburton are very proud of what they've accomplished, and I frankly don't feel any need to apologize for the way I've spent my time over the last 5 years as the CEO and chairman of a major American corporation.
I've been getting complaints from Iraqi firms and from American firms that the lack of transparency, the corruption, I think the profits that American companies are making, the main companies, are so overwhelming. I mean, like when you have a line item for $1 million and you subcontract it out for $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000, that's a huge profit, and it's the American taxpayer that's going to pay for that.
We have made a cottage industry, if not a much more than a cottage industry, out of what my former boss Colin Powell has called the terrorist industrial complex. Lots of people are making lots of money off of this so-called global war on terror.
And Bush's foreign policy team was at war with itself.
The team was not functioning as a team. And we had different views, and not just views that could be reconciled.
We were torturing people so we could attack Iraq and convince the American people we should do so. That's how drastic it got.
A few hundred feet away from here, in a closed room, carefully guarded, the Intelligence Committee was meeting on a daily basis for top-secret briefings about the information we were receiving, and the information we had in the Intelligence Committee was not the same information being given to the American people. I couldn't believe it. Members of this administration were in active, heated debate over whether aluminum tubes really meant that the Iraqis were developing nuclear weapons. Some within the administration saying, of course not. It's not the same kind of aluminum tube. At the same time that members of the administration were telling the American people to be fearful of mushroom-shaped clouds. I was angry about it. Frankly, I couldn't do much about it. Because you see, in the Intelligence Committee, we're sworn to secrecy. We can't walk outside the door and say, the statement made yesterday by the White House is in direct contradiction to classified information that's being given to this Congress. We can't do that. We couldn't make those statements. And so in my frustration, I sat here on the floor of the Senate and listened to this heated debate about invading Iraq, thinking the American people are being misled. They are not being told the truth.